Hello friends, welcome to another episode of the Seated Scribe. I am Rudrashish Dotto and you are watching a channel where we discuss pens and writing. Well, the first encounter with a fountain pen is usually memorable and important for most of us. That is possibly why Pilot, one of the top Japanese fountain pen manufacturers, designed the Kakuno, which in Japanese means I write, is a no-nonsense, simple pen that is usually targeted for beginners. Thanks to its many features that help ease beginners into the world of fountain pens, kids and even adults, we can experience the joy of writing with these delightful no-nonsense instruments. In this episode, I would be visiting two versions of the Pilot Kakuno, one in a fine nib version and the other in a medium nib version. The reason is as relevant to the Japanese idea of the nib width is to arrive at a single choice scenario of either the fine or the medium in our usual daily writing circumstances, since a Japanese fine is finer than a Western fine and a Japanese medium is finer than a Western medium. So, without any further delay, let us flip the camera and go to the pens. Pilot Kakuno pens come in boxes like these. Well, the top of the boxes indicate the nib width, F indicating a fine and M indicating a medium. Let me now unbox the pens to see what is inside. Well, this is a cap. Interestingly, this has a hexagonal shape. This is the pen. And typically, these pens come in proprietary Pilot cartridges. We will fit these cartridges and see how it works. Well, this is a maintenance guide. Well, it's entirely in Japanese, I see. Anyway, let me keep it aside. So, this is the fine nib version of Pilot Kakuno. Now, let me open the medium nib version. This too has a hexagonal shape. This is the pen and this is the cartridge. So, let me keep it aside. Well, the pens are similar except for the obvious variations in color and the width of the nibs. So, let me visit the fine nib version first. Well, these caps interestingly are hexagonal in shape. They are made of plastic. They usually do not roll. So, this perhaps explains why these pens usually do not come with clips. Now, there are 3 holes here. These are anti-choking mechanisms in case either the cap or the pen is accidentally ingested by children. This is the pen. Well, the nib of the pen is steel nib with a plastic feed. Well, the nib interestingly has a smiley. There is a smiley here. This is perhaps the reason why this pen is clearly intended and demonstrably intended for children and young adults. So, let me fit in this cartridge. In fact, these pens also usually take in the proprietary converters, the con 20, con 40 and con 70. All the three proprietary converters fit into the Pilot Kakuno. So, this is how this has to go inside. Yes, this section is punctured. It will perhaps take some time for the ink to travel from the cartridge to the nib. So, let me cap it and look at the structure of the pen as such. Now, interestingly, the nib in a Pilot Kakuno can be interchanged with the metallic version of another popular Pilot pen, the Pilot Metropolitan, and these nibs and the feet section, they are typically friction fit into the grip section. Now, there is a slight flare here. It rolls down slightly. This section is almost flat. There is a slight step up here. This also has an anti-rolling mechanism, a hexagonal shape, and this section is almost flat. It is plastic, and again there are two holes here, which according to Pilot are anti-choking mechanisms in case of accidental ingestion by children who are the target users of this pen. So, this is roughly, it is a simple no nonsense pen made of sturdy plastic. This section is shiny, but we do get a feel that the pen is light, but the body does not feel cheap at all. It is high quality plastic. Interestingly, this pen is it is pushed shut. It does not have threads. So, this is it. It is incredibly light. I cannot resist the temptation of weighing this pen just to check, because this is perhaps one of the lightest pens one can encounter, lightest fountain pens one can encounter. So, let me put this in. The cartridge is inside. Okay, the entire pen with the cartridge filled with ink weighs 13 grams. Minus the cap, the pen weighs 9 grams. So, clearly this is a very light. In fact, this is one of the lightest pens, fountain pens around, and the weight of the pen gives an enormous amount of control to any user who may be using the pen, a fountain pen, for the first time. So, this is the fine nib version. The medium nib version usually come, they are almost similar except for the nib width. They also have these interesting looking smileys. Again, the nib is a steel nib and the feed is plastic with an M written over indicating a medium nib. Let me fit in this cartridge and then we will be taking a writing sample. These cartridges can be reused if this section is filled with ink either through a narrow eyedropper or a syringe. Well, the cap section has this typical Pilot Kakuno logo. This pen is meant clearly for children and young adults. Possibly it's Pilot's way of welcoming them to the world of fountain pens. So we will now take a writing sample and see how the fine and the medium nibbed versions work under actual writing circumstances. I expect by this time the ink from the cartridge has traveled to the nib. So let me see how the fine nibbed version works. Well, the experience is not entirely smooth. As I can see, there is a definite feedback in the fine which borders on scratchiness. So I am not sure how the fine nibbed version will actually fare under actual writing circumstances where we do not have a 100 GSM sheet and the paper is significantly thinner. So the nib has a flex. It is on the drier side. The upstrokes are dry. The slant strokes are dry too. And so that is it. It has a flex. As we can see, the upstrokes and the slant strokes are comparatively thinner than the downstrokes. It has a flex. It has a flex. There is slight hint of a calligraphic variation that can be possible in the fine nibbed version as I see it, but this experience is not entirely smooth. This experience is not entirely smooth because I do get a feedback that borders on scratchiness. I don't know whether it's an issue with this pen or whether this is an issue with most fine nibbed versions of Pilot Kakuno, but that is roughly it. In other words, the fine nibbed version of Kakuno is not a smooth writer even when used on the smoothest fountain pen friendly paper. There is a scratchiness, definite scratchiness here. Let me now visit the medium nibbed version, which is likely to be a bit more wet, and see how things work. This is smoother. This is smoother. This is definitely wetter and smooth as well. This is smooth. There is no feedback of any nature, and it is definitely wetter than the fine. The upstrokes are wet too, and there is a similar variation in the upstrokes and the slant strokes compared to the downstrokes. This nib is slightly more flexible than the fine nib version and definitely wet. So if you are to arrive at a single pen use, I would prefer, from the point of view of ease or comfort or smoothness of writing, the medium nibbed version of Pilot Kakuno and not the fine nibbed version. I am not sure, as I have said, whether the scratchiness is specific to my Pilot Kakuno, but this can put off a first time user of a fountain pen who may go with experiences of fountain pen writing as something which is not very smooth. So, if we are to arrive at a single pen choice, I would recommend the medium nibbed version of Pilot Kakuno and not the fine nibbed version under usual writing circumstances where a young child or a young adult is introduced newly to the art of fountain pen writing. So, but all in all, the Kakuno versions do tick the right boxes in terms of controllability of the pens, use of the pens, the use of ease of use, as well as the fact that these pens with these interesting colors do make colorful possessions, and usually Kakuno pens, they are very popular the world over, especially for children who are newly introduced to the world of fountain pen writing. So that is all that I have time for in this week's version. We will be back with another pen and another review next week. Till then, goodbye, stay safe.